This story has a happy ending. A 42-year-old mother was mocked by her own family. She was told she was too old. Then her baby arrived, and everything changed. Real story, told by a gynecologist. Not medical advice. You are safe here. Let's begin. You know, I still remember the day Victoria walked into my office. It was a Tuesday morning, not particularly special for anyone else, but for her, it was the day she stopped hiding. She sat in that chair across from me. The one you're sitting in right now. And she just held her purse in her lap like a shield. She was dressed beautifully as always. Expensive blazer, perfect hair. All the signs of a woman who had her life completely together. But her hands were shaking. I didn't rush her. That's something I've learned after 30 years of this work. You don't rush a woman who's carrying something heavy. Finally, she looked up at me and said, "I'm 42 years old. And I'm pregnant." There was no joy in her voice when she said it. Can you imagine that? Most women say those words, and there's at least a flicker of happiness underneath. But Victoria, she said it like she was confessing a crime. She told me she had tried for years. Years of tracking cycles, temperature charts, supplements, 3 rounds of fertility treatments that didn't work. She and her husband at the time, they divorced when she was 39, partly because of the strain. He wanted a baby so badly, and her body just wouldn't cooperate. Or so they thought. And then after she had finally given up, after she had thrown away all the ovulation kits, and accepted that motherhood might not be her story, a random Tuesday in September, 2 pink lines. She told me she stared at that test for an hour, just sat on her bathroom floor, alone, watching those lines get darker. And the first thought that came into her head wasn't, "I'm going to be a mother." It was, "What is everyone going to say?" That broke my heart. And I've been doing this long enough to know that her fear wasn't irrational. Women over 40, they get judged in ways that make my blood boil. People call them selfish. People whisper that they're too old to chase a baby around. People say they should have done it earlier, as if life always follows a perfect schedule. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not her daughter Madison, who was 19 and already pulling away. Not her colleagues. Not her own mother, who was in a nursing home with dementia and might not even understand. "I wanted you to be the first person to know," she said to me, "because I needed someone to tell me if I'm crazy." I leaned forward and I looked her right in the eyes. And I said, "Victoria, you're not crazy. You're scared. And there's a difference." She cried then. Not loud sobs, just silent tears rolling down her cheeks while she stared at her hands. What would most mothers feel in that moment? To finally have the baby you prayed for, but to be so afraid of judgment that you can't even celebrate? That's not vanity. That's exhaustion. That's a woman who has been told for years that her time had passed, and she started believing it. We did the blood work that day, confirmed the pregnancy. Everything looked good for a first visit, but as she walked out of my office, she turned back and asked me something I'll never forget. "Dr. Harper, how do I tell people I'm happy when I know they're going to make me feel ashamed?" I didn't have a good answer for her that day, but I knew one thing for certain. Victoria was already a mother. She was already fighting for her baby. She just didn't know it yet. Victoria waited 2 more weeks before telling anyone. 2 weeks of walking around with a secret pressed against her ribs, growing bigger every day. She told me later that she practiced the announcement in the mirror like she was rehearsing for a trial. "I'm pregnant." Pause. "I'm keeping the baby." Pause. "You don't have to be happy for me, but you do have to be quiet." She chose a Sunday dinner at her sister-in-law Patricia's house. Her daughter Madison was supposed to come. Her brother Michael would be there. It was family, small and contained. Safer than telling her colleagues first. Except nothing about that dinner was safe. She waited until dessert. Coffee cups in hand, the conversation light and easy. And then she just said it. "I'm pregnant. Due in the spring. It's a boy." The silence that followed wasn't the good kind. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath because something ugly wants to come out. Madison dropped her fork. The sound echoed across the table like a gunshot. Her daughter's face went through 5 different emotions in 3 seconds: shock, confusion, something that looked like betrayal, and then finally, a cold, hard wall came down behind her eyes. She didn't say a word. She just pushed back from the table and walked out the front door. Victoria started to go after her, but Patricia spoke first. "A baby?" Patricia set down her coffee cup with deliberate slowness. "Victoria, you're 42. Madison is practically grown. Isn't that a lot to take on at your age?" That's exactly what she said. At your age? Like Victoria was applying for a marathon she had no business running. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but didn't defend her. Patricia continued, her voice sweet in that way women use when they want to sound concerned but really mean cruel. "I just worry about you. The risks at your age are so high. And think about the child, having such an older mother. Kids can be so cruel to each other." Victoria sat there with her hands folded in her lap, her untouched coffee growing cold. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She just nodded, said she understood the concerns, and left 10 minutes later. The car ride home was the longest of her life. She pulled into her driveway, sat in the darkness with the engine off, and placed both hands on her belly. She was only showing a little, just a soft curve that strangers wouldn't notice. But she could feel him in there. A tiny warmth. A secret she was already failing to protect. The next day at work was worse. She had told one person in the office, her assistant, a sweet young woman named Chloe who had hugged her and said congratulations without a hint of judgment. But office walls have ears. By lunchtime, Victoria overheard 2 junior architects whispering by the water cooler. "Did you hear about Victoria? Pregnant at her age. I mean, good for her, I guess, but isn't that kind of selfish? She's going to be almost 60 when that kid graduates high school. My mom had me at 40 and she was so tired all the time. I barely remember her playing with me." Victoria walked past them without stopping. Her heels clicked against the floor, steady and strong. But inside, something was cracking. Have you ever seen someone go through something emotionally similar? A woman who should be celebrating, but instead she's shrinking? That was Victoria. Every whisper, every sideways glance, every concerned comment wrapped in velvet and handed to her like a gift. She took all of it. And she started believing maybe they were right. That night, she didn't talk to her belly. She didn't sing or rub her bump or do any of the things she had imagined doing when she still believed pregnancy would feel like joy. She just lay in the dark, one hand on her stomach, and wondered if she was bringing a child into a world that had already decided he shouldn't exist. Her phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "I need time to think about this. Don't call me." Victoria typed back 3 words. "I love you." Then she deleted it without sending. She almost didn't call me. That's what haunts me the most when I think back on Victoria's pregnancy. She almost didn't call. She almost drove herself to a hospital across town, because she was too ashamed to come to the one where I work. Too ashamed to admit that maybe the whispers were right. Maybe her body wasn't built for this. It happened at 14 weeks and 3 days. Victoria woke up at 2 in the morning to use the bathroom, which had become her new normal. She shuffled through her dark apartment, still half asleep, still carrying the weight of that horrible dinner and those office whispers. And then she saw the blood. She told me later that for 1 full minute, she just stood there staring at the toilet bowl. Her mind went completely blank. Not panic. Not tears. Just nothing. Like her brain had shut down to protect her from feeling anything at all. Then the shaking started. She didn't call an ambulance. She didn't call her brother or Madison, or anyone who might have sat with her in the emergency room. She grabbed her car keys, threw on a coat over her pajamas, and drove herself 20 minutes through empty streets to the nearest hospital. Not mine. A different one. One where nobody knew her. But that hospital transferred her to us when they saw her history. And at 4 in the morning, I got the call. I met her in the emergency department. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her coat, still wearing the same frozen expression. Her hands were pressed against her lower belly, like she was physically holding her baby inside. And when she saw me walk through the curtain, Something in her face finally broke. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you're probably disappointed in me. I should have been more careful. I should have." I stopped her right there. "Victoria, nothing you did caused this. Do you hear me? Nothing." We moved her to ultrasound quickly. I watched her grip the sides of the table, while the tech moved the wand over her belly. Her knuckles were white. She wasn't breathing. She was just staring at the ceiling, lips moving silently like she was praying or bargaining or both. And then we heard it. That heartbeat. Strong and fast and absolutely perfect. Victoria let out a sound I'll never forget. Half sob, half laugh, completely raw. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. For the first time since she sat in my office, she was really smiling. The bleed was a small subchorionic hematoma. Scary, yes. Common, also yes. We talked about modified bed rest, about watching for more bleeding, about all the precautions. But the baby was fine. Kicking and spinning and completely unaware that his mother had just lived through the longest hour of her life. I sat with her while the tears dried, and I watched her slowly, carefully, put her hand back on her belly. Not frozen this time. Tender. "He's still here," she said. Not a question. A statement. "He's still here," I confirmed. Victoria looked at me then, and her voice was so small. "Dr. Harper, is my age making this harder? Be honest with me. I can't live on pretty lies anymore." Could any mother truly prepare for something like this? To want a baby so badly, and then spend every day afraid that your own body might fail you both? I took her hand, and I told her the truth. That her age added risks, yes, but that younger women have bleeds too. That pregnancy is never guaranteed for anyone. That the only thing we could do was take it day by day, and that she had already survived something that would have broken a lot of women. She nodded slowly, wiped her face, took a breath. "I want to tell my mother," she said, "before I lose the chance. Even if she doesn't understand anymore. I want her to know she's going to have a grandson." I helped her stand up. And as she walked out of that emergency room, she wasn't the same woman who had driven herself there hours earlier. She was still scared, still uncertain, but she wasn't hiding anymore. The bed rest was supposed to be her pause button, a chance to slow down, to protect the baby, to let her body heal from the scare. But Victoria quickly learned that being still didn't mean being at peace. In fact, the quiet was the hardest part. She hired a young assistant named Sarah to help with her architectural drawings at home. Sarah was 24, bright-eyed, and blessedly uncomplicated. She didn't know about the whispers or the bleeding or the daughter who wouldn't return calls. She just showed up every morning with coffee and spread blueprints across Victoria's dining table, like they were planning something beautiful. But at night, when Sarah went home and the apartment fell silent, Victoria talked to her belly. She told me about it later, almost embarrassed. "I know it sounds crazy," she said. "Talking to someone who can't even hear me yet." I told her it wasn't crazy at all. I told her I'd seen Olympic athletes, corporate executives, even a woman who had argued cases in front of the Supreme Court, all of them whispering to their bellies in the dark. Because pregnancy isn't rational. It's the most irrational, terrifying, hopeful thing a human body can do. Victoria's nightly conversations weren't soft lullabies or happy plans. She apologized to her son, over and over again. "I'm sorry I'm not younger. I'm sorry I can't run with you the way other mothers will. I'm sorry that when you're in high school, people might think I'm your grandmother. I'm sorry I didn't figure this out sooner." She told me those words came out of her mouth every single night for 3 weeks. And every single night, she cried a little. Not sobbing, just tears slipping down her cheeks while she lay in the dark, one hand on her bump, hoping her son could somehow feel how wanted he was beneath all that fear. The texts from Madison became colder, shorter. Victoria would send a photo of something ordinary, a bird on her balcony, a drawing she was working on, a book she was reading, and Madison would reply with a thumbs-up emoji or nothing at all. That silence cut deeper than any of Patricia's comments, because her daughter wasn't just rejecting the pregnancy, She was rejecting Victoria herself. One afternoon, Victoria decided to visit her mother at the nursing home. Eleanor was 78, deep into her dementia, living in a fog that sometimes cleared for 10 minutes at a time. Victoria almost didn't go. She was tired, still spotting a little, and terrified that her mother wouldn't recognize her. But she went. Her mother was sitting by the window, staring at a bird feeder, her hands folded in her lap like a patient child. Victoria pulled up a chair and took her mother's hand. Mama. It's me, Victoria. Eleanor blinked slowly, looked at her daughter's face, and for a moment nothing. Just that blank, drifting confusion that dementia leaves in its wake. Then Eleanor's eyes dropped to Victoria's small bump, and something shifted. She reached out with her free hand, trembling, and placed it gently on Victoria's belly. Her fingers spread wide like she was trying to feel something through the fabric of Victoria's sweater. A baby. Eleanor's voice was thin but clear. You have a baby in there? Victoria nodded, tears already falling. Yes, Mama. A boy. He's due in the spring. Eleanor sat very still. Her cloudy eyes moved from her daughter's face to the bump and back again. And then she smiled. A real smile. The kind Victoria hadn't seen in years. I told you, sweetheart, Eleanor said softly, her voice carrying a strength that seemed impossible for her frail body. A baby is never a mistake. Only people are cruel. You remember that. Victoria broke down right there, her head in her mother's lap, crying the way she hadn't let herself cry since she was a little girl. Her mother stroked her hair, humming an old lullaby Victoria hadn't heard in decades. Outside the window, the birds kept eating. Inside that small room, a mother held her daughter, and a grandmother blessed a grandson she might never remember meeting. Victoria drove home that night with her hand on her belly, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't apologize to her baby. She just said 3 words. Your grandma knows. Victoria came to that appointment hopeful. I could see it in her face the moment she walked into the ultrasound room. The bed rest had held. The spotting had stopped. She had started eating better, sleeping a little more, even letting herself look at baby names online. Hope had crept back into her life like a shy animal. Tentative, easily startled, but present. She was 20 weeks exactly. The halfway point. The anatomy scan was supposed to be a celebration. A chance to see her son's fingers and toes, his beating heart, his growing brain. A chance to breathe. The ultrasound tech, a gentle woman named Denise who had been doing this for 22 years, started the scan with her usual warm chatter. There's his stomach. There's his bladder. Looking good so far. Victoria watched the screen like it was showing her the meaning of life. She told me later that she memorized every curve and shadow, every tiny movement of those miniature hands. And then Denise went quiet. Not silent exactly. She kept talking, kept measuring, kept clicking her keyboard. But the warmth left her voice. The easy rhythm changed. Victoria noticed immediately because mothers always notice. They feel a shift in the room before their brains can name it. I came in when Denise signaled me, and when I looked at the images on the screen, my heart sank. The umbilical cord. It should have 3 vessels, 2 arteries and 1 vein. Victoria's baby had only 2. A 2-vessel cord. On its own, not a disaster. Many babies with this condition are born perfectly healthy, but it can be a marker. A warning flag that something else might be developing underneath. Then I saw the growth measurements. Her son was measuring small. Not dramatically, but enough to flag. Enough to suggest the earliest signs of fetal growth restriction. His abdomen was smaller than his head. His femur was shorter than it should be. He was fighting for every millimeter, this little boy. I explained everything to Victoria slowly, carefully. I watched her face change from hope to confusion to that terrible gray fear I know too well. His chances, she asked. Her voice didn't shake. That's how I knew she was terrified. I told her the truth. Higher risk of preterm birth. Higher risk of low birth weight. Potential heart concerns that would need monitoring. And the possibility, just a possibility, that he would need time in the NICU if he came too early or too small. She didn't cry. She placed both hands on her belly, a gesture I had seen her do 100 times by now, but this time her knuckles were white. Are you telling me to prepare for the worst? I pulled my stool closer to her. I put my hand on her shoulder and waited until she looked at me. I'm telling you to prepare for a fight, and you're not alone in it. Victoria stared at me for a long moment. Then she looked back at the ultrasound screen, where her son's tiny heart was still beating, still fighting, still refusing to give up. He's still moving, she whispered. I felt him kick this morning. Twice. He's still in there, and he's still moving. Do you think hope alone can sometimes keep a mother strong? I don't know the answer to that question. But I watched Victoria grip that hope like a lifeline. I watched her ask Denise to print 3 copies of the ultrasound. One for her apartment, one for her office, one to carry in her wallet. I watched her schedule her next growth scan before she even left the room. On her way out, she turned back to me. I want to know everything. Every risk. Every sign to watch for. Don't protect me from the hard parts. I need to be ready for him. She walked out with her shoulders straight and her hand on her belly, but I saw her pause in the hallway. I saw her lean against the wall for just a second, close her eyes, and breathe like she was trying to remember how. If stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to support stories that remind us what courage actually looks like. It's not a woman who isn't afraid. It's a woman who keeps walking forward anyway. Victoria had never been someone who lived for likes. She used social media the way most professional women her age did. A LinkedIn profile she updated twice a year, a Facebook account she checked on holidays, and an Instagram feed of architectural photography she never posted on. She was invisible online by choice. But someone else made her visible. It happened on a Wednesday. Victoria was 23 weeks pregnant, still working from home, still monitoring every kick and flutter with anxious attention. She had stopped going into the office after the whispers became too loud. Sarah brought work to her dining table. Her world had shrunk to the size of her apartment, her doctor's appointments, and the small, determined life growing inside her. She didn't see the post until 3 in the morning. Insomnia had become her unwanted companion. She was scrolling through her phone, trying to distract herself from the familiar weight of worry, when a notification popped up. Someone had tagged her in a local moms group, a group she had never joined, a group with 12,000 members. The photo was taken from across her office break room. She recognized her own profile, her bump visible under a loose blouse, her hand resting on her belly while she waited for the microwave. She didn't remember anyone taking it. That was the violation. Someone had captured her in a private moment, uploaded it without her consent, and added a caption that made Victoria's blood run cold. Shouldn't she be a grandmother by now? At 42, having a miracle baby is just selfish. Think about the child. The comments had been going for 6 hours by the time she saw them. Hundreds of them. Women hiding behind profile pictures of their own children, writing things they would never say to someone's face. My mom had me at 41 and I resented her for being too tired to play with me. She'll be 60 at his high school graduation. That's not fair to him. Some people just can't accept when their time has passed. Imagine being that kid and finding out your mom was basically elderly when you were born. Victoria sat in the dark, her phone glowing against her face, and read every single comment. Not because she wanted to, because she couldn't look away. Each word was a small cut, and she just kept bleeding. She told me later that she almost woke up Sarah, who was sleeping on her couch those nights to help in case of emergencies. But she didn't. She felt too ashamed, too exposed, too much like everyone had been right about her all along. Then her son kicked. Hard. 3 kicks in a row, right against her ribs. A forceful, insistent reminder that he was there, that he could feel her heart racing, that her stress was his stress. Victoria put her phone down. She placed both hands on her belly, closed her eyes, and whispered into the dark. They don't know you. They don't know how wanted you are. They don't know that I've prayed for you longer than some of those women have been alive. You are not a mistake. You are not selfish. You are my son. She didn't cry. The tears had been replaced by something harder, something quieter. At 4 in the morning, she opened her phone one more time. She screenshotted every cruel comment. She saved the photo of herself that someone had stolen. And then she went into her settings and deleted every social media account she had. No dramatic goodbye post. No call out of the woman who took the photo. Just silence. She told me about it at her next appointment. I could see the exhaustion in her face, but also something else. Something that looked like armor. Why didn't you fight back? I asked her. You had every right to defend yourself. Victoria looked down at her bump. 23 weeks. Her son was the size of a grapefruit now. Kicking. Growing. Holding on. Because they don't deserve my energy, she said quietly. My son does. Every tear I cry over strangers is a tear I'm not saving for him. So I'm done. She reached into her wallet and pulled out that ultrasound photo, the one from the anatomy scan. She looked at it for a long time. His name is Elijah, she said. I decided last night. It means my God is Yahweh. But to me it means the one they said I couldn't have. Can a mother's instinct sometimes be stronger than medical fear? I watched Victoria prove that it could. She wasn't fighting the comments anymore. She was fighting for something much bigger. The first contraction hit at 11:45 on a Thursday night. Victoria was in bed, rereading a novel she had already finished twice, when a deep, unfamiliar pressure spread across her lower back. She paused, waited, told herself it was just Braxton Hicks. False labor. Her body practicing for something that was still weeks away. Then another one came 8 minutes later. And another. She got out of bed slowly, walked to the bathroom, and stood there with her hands pressed against the sink. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, wide-eyed, holding her bump like it might shatter. She counted in her head. 7 minutes. Then 6. Then back to 8. Irregular but persistent. And that back pain wasn't letting up. She called the after-hours line. I answered because I always answer when my high-risk patients are in the danger zone. Victoria's voice was calm on the surface, but I could hear the tremor underneath. My back hurts, like period cramps but deeper, and I feel pressure. Low pressure. Are you timing them? Yes. Every 6 to 9 minutes. For the last hour. I didn't hesitate. Come in now. Don't wait. I'll meet you at the hospital. She drove herself again. That woman never learned to let people help her, and part of me wanted to shake her for it. But I also understood. When you've been told you're too old, too risky, too selfish, you stop asking for help. You prove you can do it alone, even when you shouldn't have to. In the car, somewhere between the freeway and the hospital exit, Victoria did something she hadn't done in weeks. She called Madison. The phone rang 4 times. Then voicemail. Victoria left a shaking message. Madison, it's Mom. I'm on my way to the hospital. I'm having contractions at 29 weeks. I don't know if it's real labor or not. I'm scared. I don't care if you hate me. I just needed someone to know I'm scared. She hung up before she could hear the beep. When she arrived, the triage nurse put her on the monitor immediately. And there it was, clear as anything. Contractions every 7 minutes. Her cervix had started to thin. Not dilated yet, but softening. Preparing. 29 weeks and her body was trying to send Elijah into the world before his lungs were ready. I walked in while the magnesium sulfate was being hung. That medication is brutal. It stops preterm labor by relaxing the smooth muscles, but the side effects feel like punishment. Victoria's face flushed bright red. She told me later it felt like someone had lit a fire inside her veins. Nausea washed over her in waves. Her head pounded. But through all of it, her hands stayed on her belly. Is he still moving? She asked. Not about the pain. Not about the contractions. Only about him. I placed the Doppler against her stomach, and that heartbeat filled the room. Strong. Fussed. Furious almost. Like Elijah was angry at being disturbed. Victoria closed her eyes and let out a breath she had been holding for 2 hours. He's fighting, she whispered. He's still fighting. We stopped the labor by morning. Her cervix settled down. The contractions faded to nothing. But we kept her in the hospital for observation. She needed steroid shots to accelerate Elijah's lung development, just in case. Just in case he decided to come anyway. That night, alone in her hospital room, Victoria felt her phone buzz. A text from Madison. "I'm coming tomorrow. Don't argue." Victoria stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then she placed her phone on her belly, right where Elijah's feet were pressing outward, and let herself cry. Not from fear this time. From something that felt dangerously close to hope. The morning after her contractions stopped, I sat down with Victoria in her hospital room. No ultrasound, no Doppler. Just 2 women and a conversation I wish I never had to have. She looked smaller in that hospital bed. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy knot. There were circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. But her hand never left her belly, even when she reached for the water cup, even when she signed consent forms. Her palm stayed pressed against the spot where Elijah liked to kick. I pulled the chair close to her bed, close enough that she could see my face clearly, close enough that she couldn't look away from what I was about to say. "Victoria, I need you to understand something. What happened last night? Your body was trying to go into labor at 29 weeks. We stopped it this time. But I can't promise we can stop it again." She nodded slowly. Her eyes stayed on mine. Braver than she felt, I could tell. I continued. "If Elijah comes before 34 weeks, he will need the NICU. Not maybe. Not possibly. He will need it. Weeks there. Possibly months. Tubes for breathing. Wires for monitoring. Feeding lines through his tiny veins." I watched her throat move as she swallowed. He might need help with his temperature, his blood sugar, his jaundice levels. Everything that a full-term baby's body does automatically, his body might need machines to do for him. At least at first. Victoria's hand shifted on her belly. Protective. Almost instinctive. Will he survive? The question hung between us. Simple words. Impossible weight. I could have softened it. I could have said most babies do. Or we have excellent outcomes, or any of the gentle things we tell ourselves to make the fear smaller. But Victoria had asked me not to protect her from the hard parts. And I had promised I wouldn't. If he comes right now, today, his chances are good. But not guaranteed. Every week we keep him inside is a miracle. At 30 weeks, his chances get better. At 32, much better. At 34, his lungs have a real shot at working on their own. I reached over and took her hand. She let me. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to fight for every single day. You on bed rest in this hospital. Me monitoring around the clock. Elijah doing his part to keep growing. One day at a time. That's the only way through this." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone, scrolled to a photo of Elijah's last ultrasound, and stared at it. "Can you print me a new one?" she asked. "The last one is getting wrinkled." I had a nurse bring in a fresh print. Victoria took it with both hands, studied every curve and shadow, then placed it on the bedside table where she could see it from her pillow. She talked to that photo every hour. Not dramatic speeches. Small things. "Good morning, little one. Keep growing today. I had applesauce for breakfast. Your grandmother used to say that makes babies strong. The nurse says your heartbeat is beautiful. I agree." Madison arrived that afternoon. She stood in the doorway of the hospital room, holding a small bag, looking nothing like the cold daughter who had sent thumbs-up emojis. Her eyes went to her mother's belly first, then to the 4 in Victoria's arm, then to the ultrasound photo on the bedside table. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. Victoria held out her hand, and Madison took it. The hospital bed rest stretched into weeks. 30 weeks. 31. 32. Each day Victoria woke up and asked the same question. "Is he still in there?" And each day, I got to say yes. Madison came every afternoon after her classes. She brought books, bad hospital coffee, and something Victoria hadn't expected. Quiet conversations about the future. Not the future Victoria had imagined for herself. A new one. One where Madison asked questions about Elijah's nursery colors and what kind of stroller they would need. Small steps, but steps. Still, the loneliness was heavy. Victoria watched other women on the maternity floor come and go with their balloons and their bouquets, and their husbands filming delivery room entrances. She had none of that. The father wasn't in the picture. Her brother Michael had sent flowers once but hadn't visited. Patricia hadn't called at all. There were nights when Victoria stared at the ceiling and wondered if anyone outside this hospital room would even remember she existed. Then one afternoon, a knock changed everything. I wasn't there when it happened. Victoria told me about it later, her voice still full of wonder. She was sitting up in bed, working on a small cross-stitch she had started for Elijah's nursery. A tiny elephant she wasn't very good at making. The door opened, and a woman she had never seen before walked in. Not a nurse. Not a doctor. Not hospital staff at all. The woman was maybe 58, silver-haired, dressed in comfortable jeans and a soft sweater. She carried a paper bag in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. She didn't ask permission. She just walked to the chair beside Victoria's bed and sat down. "I'm Deborah," she said. "Dr. Harper told me about you. I hope you don't mind that I came." Victoria didn't know what to say. She just stared at this stranger who had invaded her room like she belonged there. Deborah set the paper bag on the bedside table. "Homemade oatmeal cookies. My son's recipe, actually. He's been baking since he was 12. Terrible messes. Wonderful cookies. Your son." Victoria's voice came out rough from disuse. Deborah smiled. A warm, easy smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "My youngest. He's 23 now. 6'2". Plays the guitar badly and thinks I hung the moon." She paused, let that settle. "I had him when I was 44 years old, Victoria. After 11 years of trying. After 4 miscarriages. After every single person in my life told me to give up." Victoria's hand went to her belly. Protective. Instinctive. Deborah leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped, intimate and sure. "They said I was selfish. They said I'd be too tired. They said I'd ruin his life by being an old mother. Do you know what my son calls me? His miracle. Every cruel word they said about my age, every whisper, every judgment. He calls me his miracle." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. Not the scared tears she had been crying for months. Something else. Something that looked like recognition. "He graduated college last spring," Deborah continued. "He stood on that stage in his cap and gown, and he looked right at me in the audience and mouthed, 'I love you, Mom.' And I thought about every person who told me I shouldn't have him. Every single one. And I felt sorry for them, because they would never know this. This feeling of being chosen, of being wanted, of being exactly the mother your child needs." Deborah stayed for 2 hours. She didn't ask invasive questions. She didn't offer unsolicited advice. She just sat with Victoria, ate cookies, and talked about her son's terrible guitar playing and his first word, and the time he tried to flush a goldfish down the toilet because he wanted it to swim in the ocean. When she finally stood to leave, she placed the folded blanket on Victoria's lap. "I made this for Elijah. Every mother needs a blanket made by someone who's been where she is." Victoria clutched that blanket like a lifeline. And for the first time in months, for the first time since that Tuesday morning in my office, she slept through the night without nightmares. Some stories deserve to be remembered because they give hope to others. Deborah had been carrying her story for 23 years, waiting to give it to someone who needed it. 35 weeks and 4 days. Victoria had made it. Every single day Deborah's cookies and Madison's visits, and that ultrasound photo had kept her going. But on a cold Monday morning, her body made a different decision. Her blood pressure spiked without warning. 180 over 110. The nurses rushed in. The machines beeped frantically. And I took one look at those numbers and knew preeclampsia. The kind that doesn't wait. "We need to deliver him, Victoria. Today. Now." She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She looked at me with those tired, fierce eyes and said, Is he big enough? 5 pounds maybe. Maybe less. But his lungs have had the steroids. He has a real chance. And you don't have a choice anymore. Your body is telling us it's time. We induced her that afternoon. The labor was slow at first, then fast, then terrifying. Victoria's body fought every step. Her blood pressure climbed and dropped and climbed again. The room filled with nurses, then more nurses, then a neonatology team standing ready in the corner with a warming bed smaller than my arm. And then the baby's heart rate dropped. I'll never forget the sound of that monitor. The steady rhythm we had listened to for months, suddenly erratic. Slow. Frighteningly slow. Victoria saw my face change before I could hide it. She grabbed my wrist with a strength I didn't know she had. What's wrong with him? His heart rate is dropping. We need to move fast. I need you to push, Victoria. I need you to push like your life depends on it. Because his does. She pushed. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. The heart rate kept falling. And then the door opened. Madison walked in. Not in scrubs, not dressed for a delivery room. She had driven 6 hours after finally listening to that voicemail Victoria had left weeks ago. 6 hours of not knowing if she would make it in time. Her face was pale, her eyes wet, but her voice was steady. I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. Victoria looked at her daughter. Her first baby. The one she had raised alone after her divorce. The one who had been so angry, so cold, so lost in her own pain that she couldn't see her mother's pain too. And now Madison was here, holding her hand, whispering, "You're not doing this alone. Neither is he." Victoria found something deep inside herself, a reserve she didn't know existed. She pushed again, and again. Her face was purple with effort. Her body was screaming. The baby's heart rate flickered, up, down, up, like a candle in the wind. "You can do this," Madison said. "You're the strongest person I know. You always have been. I was just too stupid to see it." One more push. And then a cry. Not a weak whimper. Not the fragile sound of a premature baby fighting for breath. A cry. Loud. Fierce. Angry almost. A sound that filled that delivery room like a declaration of war. Elijah was here. 5 pounds 2 ounces. Small enough to fit in his grandmother's hands. But his color was pink. His lungs were working. His eyes were wide open, furious at the bright lights and the cold air and the sudden shock of being born. The neonatology team stepped back. They looked at me. I looked at them. And we all saw the same thing. This baby didn't need the NICU. Not today. Not this miracle. They placed Elijah on Victoria's chest, skin to skin, and the moment he felt his mother's heartbeat, the one he had listened to for 35 weeks and 4 days, he stopped crying. Victoria looked down at him. Then at Madison, who was sobbing beside her. Then at me. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." I nodded, wiping my own eyes. "No, Victoria. You did it. You never stopped fighting for him. Not for one single day." She pressed her lips to Elijah's tiny forehead. And in that room full of machines and monitors and medical equipment, there was only silence. The good kind. The kind that comes after a storm. The recovery room was quiet when I checked on Victoria a few hours later. The chaos of delivery had faded into something softer. Evening light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of gold across the bed where Victoria lay with Elijah curled against her chest, his tiny fingers wrapped around the collar of her hospital gown. Madison sat in the corner, asleep in the same chair Deborah had occupied weeks ago. She had refused to leave, even when the nurses offered to find her a proper place to rest. Her hand was still stretched toward her mother, as if even in sleep she needed to feel close. But the moment that undid me, the moment I carry with me still, came when the door opened again. A nurse appeared, pushing a wheelchair, and in that wheelchair sat Eleanor, Victoria's mother, the woman with dementia, who sometimes forgot her own name. The woman who had blessed Elijah's bump in a foggy moment of clarity weeks ago. Someone, I later learned it was Madison, had arranged for her to be brought from the nursing home. Just for this. Eleanor's eyes were cloudy, unfocused. She looked smaller than I remembered, swallowed by the oversized sweater she wore. But when the nurse wheeled her close to the bed, something shifted. Victoria lifted Elijah slightly, turning him toward her mother. "Mama, look, your grandson." Eleanor stared at the baby for a long moment. Her hands trembled in her lap. And then slowly she reached out. Her weathered fingers brushed Elijah's cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible for her frail body. "I told you, sweetheart," Eleanor whispered, her voice clear as a bell despite everything. "A baby is never a mistake. Only people are cruel." Victoria's tears fell onto Elijah's blanket, the same blanket Deborah had made. The same blanket that had carried her through the darkest nights. "His name is Elijah," Victoria said softly. "I almost didn't name him. I was so afraid that if I named him, I would lose him." Eleanor nodded slowly, as if she understood something no one else could. "But you didn't lose him. He's here. And he's perfect." Madison woke then, rubbing her eyes. She saw her grandmother, saw the baby, saw her mother crying and smiling at the same time. And she walked over to stand behind Victoria's bed, placing both hands on her mother's shoulders. "I'm sorry," Madison said quietly. "For all of it. For the silence. For the anger. For making you feel alone when you needed me most." Victoria tilted her head back to look at her daughter. "You're here now. That's what matters." I stood in the doorway, watching this family come together around a baby the world had said shouldn't exist. And I thought about all the women I had seen over 30 years. All the pregnancies. All the losses. All the miracles. Victoria's story wasn't the easiest I had witnessed, but it was one of the bravest. Some women wait for the right time. The perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect bank account. They wait until life feels safe enough to bring a child into it. And I understand that. I really do. But Victoria taught me something different. She taught me that sometimes the baby arrives not when life is safe, but when a woman is ready to fight. Ready to face whispers and judgment and medical complications and her own fears. Ready to love so fiercely that none of the noise matters. There are so many mothers carrying silent struggles nobody sees. The ones who are told they're too old, too young, too poor, too single, too something. The ones who show up anyway. The ones who hold on when every voice tells them to let go. Not every miracle happens loudly. Some happen quietly inside hospital rooms, between contractions and heart rate drops and the sound of a baby's first cry. Some miracles are just women refusing to give up. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, you're always welcome here.